at Open Ed 16. We are talking today to Kate Bowles, Audrey Waters, and Rebecca Hogue, and I think some other wonderful people in the room at Open Ed, and very excited to get this started. I wanted to welcome everybody. This is a really nice way, certainly for me. I'm Bonnie Stewart. I'm in Prince Edward Island and not at Open Ed, and a little bit sad.
Every other word, I'm sorry, the audio is choppy, and so we're actually not even getting full words.
Okay. Can you hear me at all, Rebecca?
That's better. I think we just needed to talk to get going out to figure it out something.
Yeah, you sound choppy to me too. What we'll do is
try getting the bandwidth down on site, because that's what helped me. Like, I can hear Bonnie very well, and I can see you guys and everything. Just get the bandwidth a little bit down, because maybe
Okay, I think everybody who's not talking to me, otherwise, I think getting people talks, and that's why we're going to copy. And that's you guys.
Sorry, can you put that in chat, Rebecca? We can't hear you, so we're not catching that. Maybe what I'll do, could we let the room try to sort their bandwidth and maybe introduce some of the people who are virtual?
Yeah, and I'm going to tweet to Ken, so I'll just introduce myself quickly, let you guys introduce yourselves. Yeah. I'm Mahabedi from Cairo, Egypt, and I'm going to tweet with Ken.
Okay, thanks, Maha. Nadine, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I have a little bit of a cold, sorry. I'm Nadine Abulnagd. I'm connecting from Cairo, Egypt. I work with Maha at the Center for Learning and Teaching, and I do online content development.
I'm glad you're here. It's nice
Very happy to be here.
How about you, Tanya? Would you introduce yourself?
Just before Tanya does introduction, Autumn, tell me that if we're quiet for approximately, no, probably crickets.
Sorry, we can't hear you. Put it in chat. Put it in chat. We'll get our room there together, but the rest of us are going to have our own Open Ed while we wait for Open Ed to catch up with us, I think. So, Tanya, can you say hi and tell us where you are?
Sure. I'm in Kamloops, British Columbia. I work at Thompson Rivers University, and a bunch of folks are on site, and I'm not.
Okay, thanks very much. Now they need 10 seconds of silence in the room, so we're going to have a moment of silence for our room at Open Ed. I'm not very good at counting, as you can tell. Hi, Mia. I'm glad you're here. We're having a bit of trouble connecting with the room, but we're totally happy to be here together. Hopefully that few minutes of silence gave them a chance to sort out what they need to do on their end. So I'm here with Maha and Nadine in Cairo, with Tanya in Kamloops, BC, with AK. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, AK?
Hi everyone, my name is AK, normally come to you from UMass Boston, but today I'm coming to you from Salem, Massachusetts, where we just finished all of our Halloween festivities.
Big in that town, I would imagine.
50,000 people on Monday.
Wow.
Visitors.
Wow, I didn't realize that that was like a pilgrimage that people made for Halloween. Interesting.
Oh yeah, and on the weekends it's actually much more.
Yeah, Salem has a huge history of really the location of most of the American witch trials, I believe, in the 17th century. Mm-hmm. 16th, no, 18th century? When was it?
I don't remember. I learned about it in school as an ESL student, which is kind of a weird place to be because I was born in the US, but I was still an ESL student.
There you go. There you go. How about Mandy, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, but I don't know if the room wants to just quickly test to see how it's coming along for them. Can they hear us now?
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping.
Okay, so I'm speaking from Washougal in Washington State. I'm up on top of a mountain building a house and keeping my hand in to following having met quite a few of you at conferences last year, this year I'm concentrating on building. So just trying to keep it on top of what's going on by being here today.
It's a nice way to keep on top of what's going on, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's fun as well. It's nice to kind of like take off the scrubs and put on a nice shirt and come and sit down in front of the video.
Sit back and see everybody. Does the room have anything to say? Are you guys okay out there? They'll tell us when they are. I feel like I don't know if any of you ever watched Romper Room. I think it may have only been a Canadian children's show when was it American as well? I'm seeing some nods in the room. So people used to do little call outs. They never ever picked Bonnie. Rebecca, is that you? You showed up for a second, but we can't hear you.
Okay, I'm going to can't hear you guys and make any sense of what you're saying. We're getting every other syllable. So we're going to try and they're off the phone and see if we get a connection. So we're gonna end up popping out and back in again.
Okay. The room will pop out. We will be here. Mia and now Miran, I'm probably mispronouncing your name. I've only ever known you as a Twitter handle and a blog before, so I'm very excited to be in your presence. But it's one of those embarrassing moments where I have to acknowledge that I don't know how to pronounce your name. So maybe I'll let you introduce yourself, and then Mia.
Hi there. I can't believe that I just joined in. I feel like a bit of an interloper because I saw your tweet coming up. I was like, oh, I'd like to join in. And I just posted a comment on your blog as well in relation to the open dissertation, which I feel was like a bit of a ramble. But yeah, I'm very excited to take part and say hello. Yeah, I suppose you were kind of like wanting a bit about people here and who they are. Yeah, I'm Muireann O'Keefe. I work in a university in Dublin in Ireland. And I just recently, a month ago, did my Viva, I was looking at how Twitter is used for informal professional learning among teaching staff in a university. And yeah, I had some interesting findings that are slowly coming out through conferences and papers.
Maureen, aren't you the one who had a student panel in one of your conferences?
That's right, yeah. That's
right?
Right.
Did you hear what we were talking about yesterday? Because people have been yesterday and today on Virtually Connecting talking about involving students and listening to student voice. And I was like, you guys want to meet her?
Yeah, that's what we did.
Maureen? Do we say Maureen?
Muireann, sorry, Muireann.
Muireann. No, Muireann. I'm going to have to practice that. Muireann.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Anything with an M and an N at the end is good.
Sorry.
Recognize yourself. Rebecca's saying they can hear us now.
Oh, hi, Rebecca. Hi, Audrey. Hi, room. We're glad to have you. I want to make sure Mia gets a chance to introduce herself, and then we'll see how our room sounds.
Hi guys, I'm Mia Zamora. I'm at Kean University, which is in New Jersey. I'm an associate professor of English here, and I do a lot of work with digital media and learning and connected learning. And I like to write creatively and collaboratively on the web.
And you do some really beautiful work. This is such a treat because this is kind of like hanging out with my Twitter network that I don't always actually end up talking with. So this is really cool. Hey, Room, how you doing?
Just figuring out how to unmute. We can hear you now, which is so much better.
We can hear you too.
Although it looks like my lower third didn't do very well. Anyways, I'm Rebecca Hogue, co-founder, co-director of Virtually Connecting. In the room with, I will let you guys introduce yourselves because it's much easier that way.
Me? Yep. Hey everyone, I'm Audrey Waters. I'm a writer and stuff.
And I'm Kate Lewis, and I'm a fellow troublemaker and stuff. So here we are, and thank you for your patience with us getting ourselves sorted out. We really appreciate that. It was a mysterious experience for us.
We did a lot of laughing at every other word.
Yeah, it sounded that way on our end too, and that's one of the nice things about these. I think one of the things that Virtually Connecting does is it models for people who are nervous about trying technology in classroom settings and all kinds of situations, to go, oh, sometimes you can power through it, and we all have these challenges, and it's not actually a condemnation of our tech savviness or whatever. It's just, it happens, even to people like Rebecca who do it all the time. So actually it's great to sort of be able to model through that this is part of what it means to do this stuff in the open, and it means being open about mistakes and challenges as well. Mandy.
Can I just ask the two people behind on the shot also to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Lee. Bissett, I'm Crasher.
Crasher.
I'm learning to be a troublemaker from experts.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. That's what we do.
And I think Autumn is there somewhere taking photos, probably.
Back here.
I keep seeing her. But...
Yeah, Autumn's lurking and helping make sure that we can hear you.
And also quietly in the background we have Liz Losh, who is just sitting in and watching, which is lovely.
Hi, Liz.
Oh, hi, Liz. Wait, if she's willing to come on, I'd love to have her on.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I love the panel you guys did a couple of days ago. Hi, Liz.
Again, Liz is someone whose work I know, but who I've never actually been in a conversation with. This is great. So is troublemaking a theme of Open Ed this year, or is this just this?
No, I think it's just us.
No, this is the troublemaking posse.
Yeah.
What is I've been watching the stream, I guess, out of Open Ed, seeing some interesting conversations, seeing a lot of people happy to be together. I know that last year there was a big, are we talking about open textbooks, or are we talking about open practice type of, to some extent, division that came out of the conference. Are you feeling any of that this year? Is there a different feel? What's it feel like? What's it like to be in the room?
Look, it's odd because I've never been before, so I was startled by the introduction on the first day that this is a family reunion. And that's quite an odd feeling for someone who's...
not kin.
Yeah, not kin. Actually,
Right.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Not kin. And it doesn't necessarily mean... it just means that the presumption of kinship can continue over many events for people who are always on the inside, but there's almost always people who are floating around evaluating that experience from the outside. And I feel like a really curious outsider.
How about you, Audrey?
Well, I am not registered for the conference. I had to sneak in.
You're that cousin who stands on the outside having a smoke.
I was the person not invited to the family reunion that saw it on Facebook and showed up anyway.
Yeah, no one seemed to mind last night at the reception. I think you got a drink ticket, so I mean, let's be honest. It's almost like it was a very effective.
But these things are interesting. I mean, there's been a lot of strange emphasis today on showing your lanyard. You know, a kind of, are you kin? Are you kin? And so I was thinking, well, how's Audrey going to get in? And so I was sort of thinking, well, I'm going to have to pop outside and throw my lanyard out of the window so that Audrey can come in as me. You know, it's a weird feeling.
Can I just ask a question? Every time you say kin, are you talking about kinship or are you talking about kin lane? Because that could be confusing. Because I thought maybe she got the ticket because kin is registered for the conference.
Yeah, you could just award kin badge.
Partner, just for anybody who's listening and doesn't know. So, yeah. It's an interesting, we could do a whole sort of discussion on conferences and who they leave in and who they leave out and how to navigate those boundaries without necessarily then being caught and not allowed in when you try to crash. Yeah.
Look, I think this is one of the things that's interesting about these events. I'll tell you what I've observed, Bonnie, is that everyone I've spoken to has quietly said, I'm not really going to any sessions. I just came here to meet people. Mm-hmm. And so that's very congruent with what Virtually Connecting is also doing. Mm-hmm. Just putting faces to faces and saying, we come to these events because we want to spend time together. Okay. And the schedule, to an extent, is a ruse that makes that possible.
We know that, well, you
well,
know
the
that,
schedule makes the institutions fund the people who can make it, maybe?
yeah,
Because the institution won't fund you to go to an unconference.
right, there's funding. Now, I think that we need to get more creative when we're organizing conferences on what first authorship on a session is, so that more people can get access to the funding without the need for artificial presentations. That being said, the nice thing about having the presentations is you know you're going to get the people in the room that you want to ask the questions to if their panel happens to be the one that is up. So it tells you when you need to be places.
And where to find.
And where to find people.
Yeah.
I think like things in academia, right? There's the structure that we're all accustomed to, and there are a lot of people who might not actually be maybe the people at this conference, or certainly the people in this conversation, but who think of conferences perhaps as places they go to meet their colleagues, but also to present their stuff. And then there's kind of a different approach. I mean, what I think of as a more open practice approach, where I mostly go to conferences because I live in a tiny little island where none of you live. And so I like you and I like to see you. And that's definitely, the pleasure in it for me. But we haven't got structures within the academy that really allow us to talk about those things yet.
Sorry, I lost the video and I don't know where it went.
Can you still hear us?
Yeah, they can hear us. It's just a window popped up and I can't figure out which one has the video. And can somebody, I just can't see my screen is my problem.
You can keep talking though, because we can hear you.
Yep, you're all good.
Find the picture, there it is.
There.
I figured out which window I pop-up blocked you.
But Bonnie, I mean, another way, and I'd be interested to know what the virtual participants are also sort of thinking about this. Being here, I'm tremendously conscious of the environmental cost of me getting here. I've come from Australia to here for like 2 days, and if I was to look at the carbon footprint of that, I think I'd be slightly ashamed. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what the future of this kind of event should be. Mm-hmm. Not what should it be? This approach, this virtually connecting approach, is actually so much better for the planet. So how do we make this really sustainable and central rather than marginal and in the corridor and perched on a table and, when there's nothing else going on? Mm-hmm. Because, this is, we really won't be able to do this forever. Or, those of you living on tiny little islands will be in boats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really a lovely thought. I was going off on one after you said that, Kate, as most of what you say makes me do. But I was thinking, so the problem would be, so you have all these wonderful, you could have a whole virtual conference where everybody's coming in from everywhere, but then the one thing that we all like is being able to sidle up to someone that you may possibly know at a conference and introduce yourself and then actually have a conversation, which is almost impossible to do if you're constrained, and we are constrained, for example, here by being invited into the conversation. And so immediately I was going, oh, how do we crack that? But yes. I think it might be possible. I can see how it might be possible. I'm off. I'm off on one now.
No, yeah. I love that, Mandy. I'm so glad you said that.
It's sort of an interesting challenge, because what happens is you have these these things, you watch the videos. I watch a lot of the virtual connecting videos. I feel like I know people, and I've never met them. Yeah. And they don't necessarily know me.
I think it's partly culture.
Go ahead, Tanya.
I think it's culture too. I mean, where I used to work, I worked for 4 years, and I never ever met anyone in person. People worked around the world, and we talked on the phone. That's what we did. I think the culture in higher ed is the conference culture, and I think that comes with it. So there comes an expectation with that you don't find in other areas. And I think there's real pros and cons to that. But I think the being virtual is more foreign in this setting than it is in other settings. And so that brings with it its own challenges.
I was also thinking that I had a similar discussion at work for some else, and I've been to a number of conferences, and I am less likely, I guess it's my personality, to just sit down next to somebody and saying, so, what have you seen? What's interesting? Sometimes it happens at Birds of a Feather Tools for lunch, but I'm less likely to do that before or after a session. But it's more likely for me to just look at somebody's Twitter handle and say, hey, let me just tweet Rebecca or George Siemens or Mia Zamora and say, hey, that was interesting on your blog post. Can you tell me more? Or do you have a resource for this? Something along those lines, because the barrier to entry for me in that aspect is lower, whereas it is higher face-to-face. Sometimes I feel like people in the face-to-face environment would say, who are you? What do you want from me?
I feel very strongly that that's the case. I'm very like you. I don't really like the fuss of meeting people. I'm never sure that I do it justice. And whereas the idea that you've just given me is, what if we thought of all of our blogs as a continuous conference? If we thought of conference in a literal sense as conferring, right. We don't need to do this. I mean, if I want to know what Audrey's working on, you know, it pops into my email and I'm instantly kind of engaged with that. And I can, exactly like you, I can tweet and say, hey, that's an idea I want to develop. So I think, Tanya, when you say it's the culture, you're right. And that's absolutely something we must change.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because I find higher ed very relational. And I think that in some ways that's really, really good. And in some ways, when you are on the outside, it's extremely hard to figure out how you find your way in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can I?
Unlike, yeah.
Sorry, I feel as if it's breaking either. I thought maybe, and it was just in relation to that very long comment that I wrote, which is maybe too long to read. But yeah, it was about my own context and its conference. And Audrey, there where you say you were sneaking into the conference, I have done that in an allowed way once from a very good colleague, because we have a local EdTech conference here, and I was at a time when I was in between jobs, in between education jobs, and yeah, so I didn't have income or funding to pay the expensive conference fees, and I realised that there's things that need to be paid, as in venue, accommodation, meals, and all that kind of thing. Me to come along to the conference and take part and be part of that conversation and culture. But then there was another conference that I wanted to go for, and it was valuable to me in terms of like what my research is going to be. And they asked for my institutional affiliation, and I had none because I wasn't signed up. I wasn't employed. I wasn't signed up. And I found that really, like, I can put words in it now, that I felt marginalized. I didn't understand it at the time, but you know, it's about education and about this inclusivity. And if education is for a greater social good and we want many people to benefit from it, you know, I came across that these things are constantly reinforced through the structures of conferences, that were reinforcing things that I experienced, I suppose. I hope that makes sense.
It sure does.
It really does. Yes. I mean, as someone who works outside of institutions, I find, you know, the only way I can come to conferences is if I'm getting paid to speak at the conference. I don't have a travel budget. I don't have institutional support to do, you know, that sponsors me for professional development. And I am here in Richmond to see colleagues and friends in the flesh. But I had to hustle for another gig in order to help me get here, to be in the flesh with these people. Because it is hard without, you know, when you are marginalized in that way.
And you don't have an affiliation, or you have multiple sort of affiliations. So my introduction becomes this really long thing because I'm like affiliated with 3 different places, and I just like, how do I introduce myself? I have no idea.
One of the things though, when and because this is conferences, sorry, can sort of see me as a shadowy figure, which is how I like to be seen. But one of the things, and I always look forward to these conferences and face-to-face and not only seeing people, but I'm an extreme extrovert, so that's like, this is my bag. But it is also an incredibly privileged space in a way that this is when I get to come and have space and time to do that intellectual labor. And, you know, George talked about, not George, Gardner talked about insight in that very first thing. And there's not a lot of space in my life, in a lot of cases, for insight, because it is go, 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 busy, busy, busy. And I read everybody's blogs and I read everybody's tweet and I drink from that fire hose, but there's very little time with jobs and family and all of that kind of stuff to have that insight. And so I can come to a conference, and even though I'm going back home, and so I'm not completely abandoning it, 3 days where it's like, especially if I'm going away, you go back to the hotel room and you get to sit there and think about it. I don't have to worry about putting anybody to bed. I don't have to worry about anybody getting out tomorrow morning. The only thing I have to worry about is myself and the intellectual labor now, and the affective labor that I can now devote to these thoughts. How do we extend that privilege? That doesn't necessarily come built into a virtually connecting session where, yeah, you can pop in and out, but you know, y'all are, and I've done virtually connecting before, you go back to your life immediately afterwards usually, right? Like I got something, you know, I got to leave this virtually connecting because I got to go pick up a kid or whatever it is, or get back to my real job. You know, how do we extend that privilege?
But do remember what you said earlier, Lee, in the other session that you had today, where you talked about opportunity cost? The way you used that term, that was perfect. That was perfect, because when you think about for me, as someone who obviously participates in a lot of virtually connecting sessions, is that I end up getting spurts, you know, spurts of this intellectual conversation, but I don't. The opportunity comes to come. And all I'd have to juggle, and how much that would cost, and the carbon footprint, which is not the first thing on my mind because I have so many other barriers before that even becomes a concern, but of course it's a big concern. And so to me, that just not having the very good cost benefit altogether, that works out quite okay. Because also, unlike all of you in the room, there are almost no good quality conferences where I am, except for example, the one where I brought the entire digital pedagogy lab to Cairo, which is a big carbon footprint, so that I could be my friend. But for the most part, you know, that. So.
Yeah, and that's actually, oddly, Maha, the same situation that I'm in, and why bringing the pedagogy lab here was so valuable to me, because we're not as far away, but we're still very much not in the center of where anybody goes. And I have an institutional position, but it's not one that allows me to travel or get conference funding. So like Audrey, I need to be doing a gig if I'm going to go. And I'm lucky enough that I get to go, but it doesn't really, like, I can't be at Open Ed this week. So this is a real privilege to get to be here that mitigates some of the other factors that maybe aren't so fabulous. And AK, you're very welcome anytime if you want to come speak.
One thing that academic conferences, though, could do pretty easily, it doesn't solve the question of creating the space and time and other kinds of support, but expanding the notion of the press pass to include different kinds of civic media and different kinds of participation is not super hard for conference organizers to do. And that would at least mean that people can get in the door without having to pay a huge amount of money.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
I thought the same thing last night. I was thinking, why doesn't Audrey have a press pass? Like, why is that? That's just not kind of part of the deal. And I think, you know, when we think about this, we also need to think that a great deal of the revenue raising of conferences is then about supplying other kinds of fairly wasteful practices. And I'm quietly horrified at the level of food waste here. And I know I'm coming across as a bit of, you know, I'm on a bit of a thing about this, but I'm on a bit of a thing about it. That we really need to look at the things that we take for granted that are part of our structures of privilege that serve almost nobody, that people here are not going to the events, we're running around like lunatics, not listening. So this going back to your busy lives, we will all do the same. We'll run around. We really have to be capable of imagining a better thing than this, I feel.
So what do we need to open up? Like, this is Open Ed. What do we actually need to open up? What concepts do we need to open up to make things different 10 years from now or 20 years from now?
Look, to be honest, I think the big one, Bonnie, that we have to really dig into is institutional reward.
Mm-hmm.
That's the headwater of this whole madness, is that for people with institutional positions, even marginal ones, institutional aspirations, even marginal ones, institutional reward is the madness that sets this whole thing going.
And I just wanted to add in one other thing, which is I'm always surprised at how few sessions, and I know that, you know, you're all saying you don't come for the sessions, but I like sessions. I like hearing what people are doing, and I like hearing people speak. Maybe it's because I'm an introvert, so I don't always want to talk to people. But I wish that these conferences...
Can I just ask a question? Because I think hoping the nightmare doesn't happen, it's still traumatic that half of America feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who might be coming to America sometime next year, inshallah, that scares the heck out of me.
Yeah.
I'm like, do I even want to go there? How do I I mean, no American who lives in Egypt is, you know, Americans who live in Egypt are a very particular kind of American, so I don't interact with that kind of American. But I'm just thinking, but I know, you know, anyway, I think, I feel so bad for everyone, but I think it's pretty traumatic anyway, regardless.
Look, I think that I've just come from the UK, where they are in the aftermath of exactly the worst thing in the world, and they have to implement a very complicated thing. They couldn't have won it either, because they would always know about the large minority that wanted the thing that in the end they got. There's no win when it's narrow like that, because so many people just showed themselves. And that's something that I think that's something that speaks to us as educators. Those people in that voting position have come through school systems, they've come through institutional pedagogies of various kinds, and they've come out with that. That's on us.
I would add that it's also on us as people who work with technology, and I think have really, embraced in a lot of ways the argument that these technologies are going to democratize access to knowledge, that they're going to be able to sort of help bring about a more progressive world. And actually what we're seeing is the democratization of misinformation. We're seeing these technologies are actually sort of at their architected hate machines, right? And so, you know, we have at the same time, you know, that we have to have a reckoning around what are the web technologies, what are these internet technologies actually giving us? Because they seem to be churning out a lot of, they seem to be churning out a culture and really igniting a culture of hate and of ignorance.
Yeah, democracy doesn't seem to equal the progressive, you know, vision that I think many of us may have equated it with. And there is, I think, the reckoning is in a sense already happening. There's, you know, watching this from sort of north of your border after the first debate, I had that moment of, you know, I was watching half of the people in my feed who are many Americans saying, you know, I need to move to Canada. And I was sitting in Canada thinking, I can't move far away enough. Like, I don't think there is in a way from this. And that kind of goes back to I do think the trauma has already happened, no matter what happens on the 9th. And I certainly hope, you know, myself that it is not a Trump victory, but no matter what happens in the election itself, back to I think the question that Mia had kind of raised, like, is there a sense of things that we can do? Do we need to have a session of support, but also afterwards of a what the heck do we do now, right? How do we bring these again, back to the narratives conversation that Kate and I were having earlier today, narratives in the biggest sense. How do we bring narratives into play that are not contributing to that?
I'd like I like to take a positive spin on these things, because I think something good happens when really, really bad crap happens. And that's that you have a better sense of your reality in the world. And so I think this has given us an opportunity to I think it has forced people to question a lot of things that they hadn't questioned before. And I think there's something to be said for when you realize all of the things that you don't have control in this world. And what that forces you to do is to say, what are the very few things that I do have control on? And how do I make those things work better? And as small as, how do I use those ugly technologies to do good things? How do I empower myself? When everything's broken down, what am I left with that I can do to make the world a better place? And so, because I'm naive and like to think good things will happen out of bad things, I have this dream and hope that something like that's going to happen sort of on a more societal level, both in Great Britain and in the States. I don't know that it will, but I sure think that there's an opportunity there to make something good happen.
I mean, one of the things I find so concerning about this election, though, is that the intimacy of electronic communication has become suspect, and that the Trump narrative is very much about the privacy of email and that sense of interpersonal connection as being something that is contaminated, something that is unhygienic, something that is nasty. And this sense that we need to kind of make every communication public. This kind of call for radical transparency, that as an educator and as a feminist, I find terrifying.
Yeah. And then I just wanted to add on top of that, like a double layer effect. My anxiety is just what you're talking about, Liz, plus also what I would describe as like a post-truth reality, where you can say things and clearly there's documentation everywhere that what you just said is not correct, but so much of the population still is swayed by it in some way. What does that mean for the work we do? What does it mean for the position we're in? These are the kinds of questions that are swirling in my head, and I'm just wondering how that is manifesting or being addressed or felt in the conference moment for Open Ed.
That I don't think I've heard really addressed, but I think it should be. And I think one of the things that maybe we need to be a little bit careful with, and I've fallen into this trap myself, is assuming that we know that people are swayed in a deep sense by what their voting intentions are in a shallow sense. Because many people can vote the same way and it can mean very different things to them. So we don't really know enough about this quandary, I don't think. As researchers, I think we can't be satisfied with any shallow reading. But I'm not hearing it really addressed, and I think perhaps it's a good question for us to open up.
But it also brings up the question of, again, who comes to these conferences and who gets to be here, what kind of institutions are represented.
Yeah.
Right? I had a much different, if I was at Moorhead State instead of Mary Washington, I would be teaching all Trump supporters. Right? And we'd be having those kinds of discussions and having those hard kinds of debates, and all of my neighbors and all of my kids' friends and their parents would be Trump supporters. And there are a lot of people at those kinds of institutions. I don't know how many of us here are currently at those institutions with students in those areas. We get a lot of the coastal, we get, this sort of bifurcation, where are the flyover country institutions, the smaller institutions, the regional state institutions, where, these are huge questions that they are grappling with in the classroom on a much different level than maybe some of us aren't. Like in Mary Washington, the politics of the students are pretty clear. They wear it on their hearts that they are liberal and radical and activist. And so again, it's one of those, again, interesting spaces about the conference, about who is here, who is present, who is speaking, and then what kinds of conversations we have. And again, to sort of be careful with that too, in terms of thinking about that, for that, not to excuse it, but certainly to kind of bring in, I don't even want to say nuance, because that would be like saying we're on nuance. So anyways, I'll stop talking now because I'm rambling. But
I wanted to do a time check with everyone because we've been on for 45 minutes. It's up to you guys.
What's the use of the room?
Apparently no one's kicked us out yet.
Yeah, something at 2:30. So we've got another half hour before the room goes away.
Okay.
Great. can I just respond to Lee quickly? I think I was talking about this somewhere, but I think it was somewhere private, not live. And I was talking about how that I think, because other than the UK and the US, there's been something similar here in Egypt, and I think there's a disconnect between the liberals or the intellectuals or whatever and other people. And the thing is that we assume that we know better because we think we're educated, we're liberal, we're intellectual, but there must be something we're doing wrong if we don't understand why there are other people who have reached that level, and that there must be a problem, or lots of problems underlying all of this that we somehow didn't catch and we didn't notice, to the extent that this is what we're seeing now, but it's just a symptom of a lot of deeper problems, I think. That, like, for us here in Egypt, like, I couldn't see it until it happened. And I still don't understand why, and we're still not communicating well with each other. But I always think that maybe in the West there's slightly more hope, because there might be some kind of semblance of freedom that's more than we have here. So I don't know what you guys think, and because, I mean, just recently someone told me that his son married someone who was from the very different other spectrum, whose parents are from the very other spectrum of politics. And I thought it was very weird, but I realized that this happens in Egypt all the time. But in the US, it sounded weird. So I don't know what you guys think. I mean, Lee, you were talking about your neighbors and everything, and I'm sure they're nice people. So
I'm very sure that the students I teach don't have the politics that Lee describes at Mary Washington. I'm very sure that the majority of students that I teach would have different views than my own. What worries me more is the very large number of younger voters who don't feel any benefit in participating at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm concerned for the future that they will build for themselves and their families and their kids if they begin their political lives with a sense of it all being rigged.
But I wonder, in this media environment where people see that, essentially it seems to be possible to make claims that can be debunked by fact-checking 1,000 times over and nobody cares, what is going to give people a sense that the democratic process, and it's always been said that it's flawed, but it's the best we've got. What if it actually falls apart?
So we got some stuff going on. There's a 2:15 session.
So we're going to need to.
We're going to have to close very soon because people are starting to.
On that cheery note.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay!
So tune in next week, folks, when we find out what's happening.
Oh my God!
And we can see if anything is different. Thank you all for, I think, just sitting with us and being together in this strange time. And it goes to show that the is very much international.
Yeah, it's a very interesting group. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks Kate, thanks Audrey, thanks Lee, thanks Rebecca, thanks Ken, thanks Liz. Lovely to be with all of you.
Yes.
All right.
So they're closed down.
And we're live.
And Miran, and we are still live. How are you folks? Do you want to have a few more minutes? Do you need to close up, or? I have another 10 minutes, and then I've got to go to a meeting. So, but I found that
I need to go. But if you guys want to stay, you can stay. Bye.
Bye. AK is going to go vote. Well done, AK. The whole question of voting is interesting. Like I do think it's important to vote. We're having you wouldn't be hearing about it in the media to the same extent, but Prince Edward Island, which is a tiny province, is having a referendum this week on if we change our voting system, our democratic system, so that rather than first past the post voting, we right now have like multiple parties, and whichever party gets the largest proportion of the vote, that person takes the seat, and that's it. And we're looking at different forms of proportional representation, mixed member proportional representation, and a whole variety of options. And it's been really interesting because it's complicated. There are 5 options on the ballot. And so a lot of people are kind of going, no, I don't want to participate because it's too much. And yet the goal is to try to take it past sort of a simplistic reaction type of vote and make sure that rather than and also to try to create a system where maybe people actually have to get along and collaborate rather than just, I won all the toys, so we're going to do it our way.
this time.
Yeah,
so it's very interesting.
I have to say that I'm very upset at Brexit, and one of the best articles that I read straight after it, and of course I was reading a lot because I was so wrapped up in it, even more so than really the US election, which I can't get away from, but was about referendums and the nature of referendums and what's wrong with the idea of having it in a referendum. And I think that we need to be looking at that much more closely, in that, a 50-50 split does nobody any good, especially in this atmosphere of, or in this reality of lying social media. I did want to also say one point to Maha's earlier remark about not realizing these dual conversations that were going on, because one of the things is that we're so trapped in our own stream of social media that we're not necessarily seeing what else is happening. My partner, who was in the Air Force, gets a lot of other information that I would never see, and about the current election, and it's really depressing. And I don't know what we do. The only thing that it makes me want to do is go out and teach kids about digital technology. That's all it makes me want to do. I want to go down to school, local school, get in the classroom and start teaching them, and let them learn about media, which, yeah, that's my response to it all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel you on that. The panel that Kate and myself were part of, me via here today, was about narrative, and my interest in narrative is not just collecting your stories and your stories and your stories, but actually trying to use those stories to change the big narrative that we're all in, because I think to some extent I see this particular moment in time globally as a conflict of narratives and identity narratives, and where people end up being in sort of factionalized positions based on what they happen to see as their life chances and the narratives that they have available to them about what those mean, right? And to me, if we can't do a better job of creating some form of common narrative as nation states, which may be an outdated concept in and of itself, then we're not going to function as nation states. So we need to, my sense is really urgent that we need to get out and start finding ways to talk about things and give people the thinking tools that, that we value, in hopes of affecting the narratives that they've got about others and themselves.
I'm hoping that I can share with you guys and everyone, Alan and I have been working on a project that we're going to roll out in the spring semester, but it's basically an open online course called The Elements of Network Narrative. And it's really so much about what you're talking about, Bonnie. It's about the idea of civic imagination. And on the one hand, we're going to be thinking about the way narrative is being transformed by networked environments, so collaborative, open environments. So we'll be dealing with that from a technical and sort of practitioner perspective, talking about a lot of different storytelling forms that are emerging, et cetera, and pockets of culture, and sort of shedding light on that, going to visit different scholars and artists who are working in these areas. But on the other hand, we're also imagining, we're not just imagining, planning on opening up in this experience a play space, or a mirror world is what we're calling it, essentially, where we are going to be seeking through the trope or theme of alchemy, a pathway to a better world, imagining a better world, where people are going to assume alternative identities. It's going to be like a role-playing game space. And then we're going to structure out of that varying sort of like events or challenges, et cetera, where people can organize and imagine together, imagine new forms of power and working together, et cetera. So it's a real challenge because we're designing for emergence. We don't want to pin anything down, but at the same time, we want it to be aspirational in the imaginary sense, and we want it to in some ways echo the very anxiety, like addressing the anxieties that we were talking about in the general sense in our earlier conversation. So I'm definitely gonna reach out to you guys and send it out and try to get it, but we're getting classes. I think Kate's gonna be a part of it. We're trying to get global sort of participation so students from all over can be in this space, tinkering and learning from each other.
I love that. That sounds really amazing.
I think we have a lot of common interests, and I'm really excited about that.
Talk some more. See, this is what virtually connecting is for.
Yeah.
Do any of you have closing thoughts?
Well, I was just thinking a little bit about, I think it's one thing for everybody to tell their own narratives, which is value. But I have this sort of triggering thing when people say, "Oh, tell me your truth." Like, speak your truth. And the truth, and to me, it's like, as soon as you say that, it's a way of saying, yeah, you say what you think, which isn't really what's real. And so I think at some point, what I feel like right now we're seeing is a lot of belief-based systems, and what we need to do is challenge our own assumptions, not always be challenging other people's beliefs. And the reason I like data, which is always puts me on the outs with all sorts of folks in these conversations, is that what I think the value of data isn't proving that we're right, but it's in a way to challenge our own assumptions and our own beliefs, and hopefully then be able to change our own narratives to be a stronger truth. And that doesn't mean that we ever have to agree with somebody else, but it means that I'm going to take the space and time to challenge my assumptions, listen carefully to what you have to say, and then go back and reflect on it. And I feel like that somehow that's something that as we get into these real, I think to me that's the danger of narratives, is that we build these narratives that are based on what we already believe without ever going back and doing that checking.
See, and I see narrative as much more always a reflexive narrative in the big sense, not in the tell me your story, but as a way of opening up that reflexive process. Mm-hmm. And I think of data, which I value, but as a narrative of its own, right? With its own particular belief structures and systems and story that it's telling about what claims can be true. And I think I don't think you can ever escape that framework where somebody, like, you're believing something, right? Because I don't believe in objectivity, which is a fun thing to throw into the very, very end of a conversation. I don't believe in it. Gotta go now, bye. Before the tomatoes come out. But yeah,
good ending, Bonnie.
Reflexivity, whatever tools we are using to make sense of the world, right? And whatever mixed collection of tools we're using to make sense of the world. Very, very important to think about. I even work not just with reflexivity, but with an idea of diffraction, which comes out of a more data-oriented perspective, but it's actually using the process to then make change, right, in yourself and in your place in the world and in the world. Again, usually through narrative in the work that I do, but it could be done with data, like, if you don't see narrative as data. We should have another conversation about this.
Yeah.
I have to go.
I mean, gotta go, and I've actually got to go too. It was wonderful to talk to you folks today. I'm going to close this down, this virtually connecting, with a whole lot of really awesome people from all over talking open ed, politics, the future, narrative, objectivity. Good times.
Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Bye.